Okay, so I think we'll make a start. So welcome everybody to Quantum's webinar today on managing the impact of macular disease on everyday living. And this webinar, we're delighted to say, is in conjunction with the Macular Disease Foundation of Australia as part of Macula Month, which is May. And we're delighted to have Sabine Ostrowski, who's the National Manager of Healthcare Relations from the Macula Disease Foundation, to give us a presentation today on, what is macular disease, some of the risks and some of the treatments and other factors around macular disease. We've also got Peter Cracknell, who's our Vision Technology Specialist and Manager of our Queensland office, who'll be talking about some of the assistive technology that we might have that might be able to assist you if you have macular disease. So, and we also have Mike Palmer, who's acting as camera person, and I'm Rebecca Clark, and I'm in here in Sydney. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which this webinar is being presented. And in my case, that's the Darug and Gurungai people here in Sydney, and pay our respects to any elders past, present and emerging. And I know we've got people throughout the country joining us today, so that's great. Just a bit of webinar housekeeping for anyone that might not have joined us on one of these sessions before. Your microphone will be muted during the webinar, but we will have a question and answer session at the end. So if you do have any questions, it's preferable that you put them in either the Q&A area or the chat. The chat area you can get to with Alt and H if you're a keyboard user, or Command H if you're using a Mac. Or you can just click on the chat bubble. And we are recording the webinar, so we will make that available afterwards. It might take about a week to get to you, but yeah, we'll have that for you. And if you've got any technical issues, you can put those in the chat as well, and I'll monitor that. So, okay, so today we're going to have I'll do a bit of an introduction to who Quantum are and the services that we provide. So we'll then have Sabine's presentation, and just want to stress that it's a general overview, so it's not a clinical session as such. So if you've got particular clinical questions, you probably need to ask your eye specialist, but it's to give you a general overview of macular disease and some of the different aspects and treatments and risks. We'll then have the presentation by Peter on assistive technology. We'll then have a question and answer session, and then we'll provide our contact information and have a few closing bits of information. So who are Quantum? We've got about a team of 20 or so. That might have changed since I've last done this, but we're a company that's been around for over 35 years now. We started off manufacturing assistive technology, and now we're a distributor that can provide assistive technology to people all over the country. We've got sites, particularly for people that have low vision or blind, or even have learning difficulties or other things that might affect your reading and doing other everyday tasks. So we've got a number of site support centres around the country. So we've got 2 in Sydney, in Kirrawee in the south, and Thornley, where I am, in the north. In Melbourne, we've got a brand spanking new office in Mount Waverley. And we've got Spring Hill in Brisbane, where Peter is, and we've now also got a representative and hopefully soon have a location in South Australia, but we do also have consultants around the country, and we have other staff that look after Western Australia, Tasmania, Northern Territory, and the ACT. So for example, I look after the ACT as well as one of my colleagues. So how can we help you? So we've got a wide range of assistive devices to help people with low vision or blindness. So we've got anything from lighting and magnifiers through to software and braille devices for people that are braille readers. So the way we work is we work with you and also your existing service providers. If you've got OTs, occupational therapists or support coordinators, we can work with you to find something that suits your needs and what you're trying to do, whether it's reading, it might be doing your crosswords, working, doing things at school. And we work with people from all ages, from 0 to, I know we've had people that are over 100 that have got some of our equipment. So we are an NDIS provider. People can get some of our things through their My Aged Care funding and Veterans Affairs. There's also funding through Job Access for those in employment, in education, or if you're privately funded. You don't need a referral to at our services. Your ophthalmologist can refer to us, but you can also contact us directly. And we don't generally have waiting lists. So how can you see us? You can visit one of our support centres if you're in the area, and that's by appointment. But we can also generally help you trial equipment in your home, workplace or school, just either via telehealth or in person, depending on whereabouts you are. And as I said, we can work in with your current providers. So we've done joint appointments with people's occupational therapists so that you can look and work out what you're trying to do and what we have that might best suit you. We also provide training in the equipment and software that we have. So we don't just, unless you want us to, send it out and leave you to work it out. We can provide that after sales support, and we do have a service centre as well. And we try and keep you up to date with newsletters and webinars like this and other information on emerging technology and what's available. So now I'd like to introduce Sabine Ostrowski, who's the National Manager of the Healthcare Programs at the Macula Disease Foundation. And, she'd spent a lot of time, especially in Macula Month, doing a lot of educating of people. And yeah, I'll now hand over to her to give us a presentation. So thank you very much, Sabine, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, and the Quantum team for the invitation to speak today. It's fantastic to be able to connect with so many people during Mac Month, which is such an important part of our calendar. Hopefully you can see my screen okay. Give me a nod. Thanks, Rebecca. So as Rebecca said, I'm going to be talking about age-related macular degeneration. And before I start, I always like to remind people that I haven't examined your eye. I don't know your history, and so all of the information is of a general nature. So it's always best to talk to your GP or your eye health practitioner before you make any changes to your diet or lifestyle. And so today we'll be shooting through quite a busy talk about what AMD is, the stages of AMD, who's at risk and what you can do to reduce your risk, the types of symptoms you might want to look out for, some treatments that are currently existing and some that are in the pipeline, as well as a bit of interesting research about potentially upcoming treatments, and as well as what the Macular Disease Foundation does to support people living with macular disease. So to start off with, I'd really like to remind people of how important AMD is. We know at 50, 1 in 7 people will already have some sign of AMD, and that steadily increases with age. We also know that about 1 in 4 people are not diagnosed, and there's a very interesting reason as to why that may be, which we're going to touch on later. And when you compare AMD with other forms of eye disease, such as glaucoma and cataract, you can see that it takes the very majority of that pie. So age-related macular degeneration, it's a mouthful. Now, the age-related and degeneration, I understand. I look in the mirror in the mornings and I can see that age hasn't been kind. But the macula is the bit that people get stumped on. What is the macula? We know it's somewhere in the eye, but not quite sure. So I wanted to orientate ourselves so that we're all clear. So if you look at the image on the right, you can see that I have a cross-section of the eye. So here you have the eye cut in half. And essentially in the process of seeing, the eye is very much like an old-style camera. The light from what you're looking at enters the eye via the pupil, which is a little hole at the center of the iris, which is a sphincter muscle. And the iris, the colored part of your eye, is a bit like the aperture in the camera. It controls how much light is allowed into the eye, and it also helps to start focusing that light. The light then travels through the lens in the eye, which is very much like the lens in the camera. It focuses the light onto the back of the eye. And the inside of the eye is lined with the retina. This is the photosensitive part of the eye, and it's what captures that light, turns it into an electrical signal, and sends it off to the brain. And so it's very much like the film in the camera. So very much like a camera overall. Now, if you're looking at the image on the left, this is the picture of the back of the eye. So whenever you go to an optometrist or an ophthalmologist nowadays, they'll take photos of the back of the eye. Highly recommended. It's a really fantastic way of capturing how your eyes are looking at this point in time and allows us to check how they've changed over time. And when you look at this image, which is exactly what the optometrist sees when they look into your eye, you can see here the optic nerve. That's the cord that takes the electrical signal to the brain to be processed. These are the blood vessels. And then here is the macula, this tiny little area. It's only 5 millimeters wide, and it's responsible for about 90% of the information that gets processed in the visual cortex of the brain. And the macula is the central vision. So it's that part of the vision that you're using when you look directly at someone's face, when you're looking at fine detail, when you're reading. When you're looking at color, you're using the macula. So it's a really important part of the eye. So in age-related macular degeneration, what happens is there's some type of dysfunction at the macula, which leads to you losing that central vision. And so over time, you're no longer able to see as well in the center of your vision, but the peripheral vision, the vision around, still remains. So it's important to know that there are several different stages to AMD. There's early, intermediate, and late, and we're going to be talking about each of those in a little bit of detail. So just orientating yourself, remember we're here with this little tiny section is the macula, and then we've blown it up here. So this is like someone's taken a piece of the macula and put it under the microscope. So what happens in AMD? Why do we start to lose that central vision? What is happening in the eye? Essentially what happens is, as with every process in the body, when the eye is seeing, we develop waste, and waste products get taken away by these cells. These brown, spiky-legged cells are called the retinal pigment epithelial cells. So these RPE cells are like the dump trucks. They take the waste products that have been produced in the process of seeing, and they dump that waste into the bloodstream, which is shown here on the left-hand side, and then it gets taken away. So that's what happens in a normal healthy eye. But what happens in AMD is there's a breakdown. There's a dysfunction in these dump truck cells. And so instead of the waste product being dumped into the bloodstream and being taken away, we find that it starts to accumulate. And so that's what you can see there. That's a waste product. And if you go back to that image from before, you can see on the left, we have that healthy eye with the healthy macula. And then here you can see very faintly these little yellow spots. And that's what the optometrist sees. That's that waste product, which we call drusen. Now, in early AMD, most people will be completely unaware that they have this and their vision isn't impacted. And then as it progresses, you get more of these spots. They start to join up. So more of this waste is accumulating just at the macula. You don't really see it around. It can occur in other parts of the eye, but it doesn't impact the vision the same way it does at the macula. And so the good thing to know is that about 85% of people who are diagnosed with AMD will never progress past this stage, because people at this point in time will still be largely unaware that their vision has been impacted. And so that's a good thing. However, there's an unlucky 15%, which go on to develop the late stage of AMD. And you'll remember there's two types of late. There's one that's called atrophic AMD, which is also referred to as dry AMD or geographic atrophy. You may have heard those expressions. And essentially what happens in this condition is you do have the drusen, you have that waste buildup, but you also have these little holes forming at the macula. This is where the photoreceptor cells, which are the light-sensitive cells that are part of that film, they've started to shrivel up and die. And so you have essentially what's like a moth-eaten film at the macula. And so you can imagine that's really going to impact someone's vision dramatically over time. And then, of course, there's the other type of late AMD, which we refer to as neovascular AMD, but some people call it the wet one. So in wet AMD or neovascular AMD, the eye starts to develop these little blood vessels, which are abnormal. They grow into a part of the eye which they're not normally seen at. And what happens is, unfortunately, these little vessels leak. And so when you're looking again at the normal eye on the left and the eye with wet AMD on the right, you can see here all this blood and fluid has accumulated. So this is pretty dramatic. This is someone who will come into the practice and say, oh, I've just noticed I've woken up this morning and it's like someone's dropped some ink into the middle of my eye. So the late stage of AMD is really significant in terms of the way it impacts vision. And we're going to talk about those symptoms. And these people really benefit from the type of support that Quantum can offer in terms of daily living, the tasks of daily living. So the symptoms that we like to look out for, and this is important because you can develop these types of symptoms at any stage, and anytime you see anything weird, always just go to the optometrist. The first symptom to look out for is if you're wearing your glasses, they're clean, they're your own, and they're your reading glasses, and you're trying to read and the print is still hard to decipher. That may be a sign that something has changed at the macula. It could also be a million other things, so it's really important to have that checked. The second symptom is distortion or wavy lines when you wouldn't expect it. So this is something that people often observe in the kitchen with tile. They'll notice the tiles are wobbly. They're watching TV and they might notice that the side of the TV wobbles. It might be that the lines down the center of the road have a wave in them. It's quite alarming and it's an important sign to never ignore. The sooner that you get your eyes tested when you notice this type of symptom, the better for you in the long run. And then the last symptom to look out for is that sort of starting to lose that central vision. Now it's shown here as a black spot, not like that for most people. It will really vary depending on the person, but there's definitely a observation that you just can't see at the center of the vision as well as you used to. You can see around it well, but not so much the center. And in this little video here is a good little demonstration. When she looks down at her walker, it's not clear. That she looks at the carer's face, it's not clear. But when you notice around the edges, she can see that gentleman seeing to the right. So that's the good thing. You do retain that peripheral vision in AMD, but you do start to lose that central vision. So who's at risk of AMD and why is that important? Well, it's good to know if you're at risk because then you can do something to reduce your risk. And the first, of course, is age. We know that age is the most important risk factor for AMD and that by 80, about 1 in 3 people will have some sign of AMD. The second risk factor, of course, is family history. So if you or anyone in your family has AMD, then it makes the rest of the family members more likely to develop AMD. If that's a first-degree relative, such as a parent or a sibling, then that risk is increased by 50% over the lifetime. So you have a 50% lifetime risk of AMD if someone in your family directly has it. Now, we can't do a lot about families. We know this about Christmas and age. No one's discovered the fountain of youth. But there are things that you can do to control those 2 risk factors. And the most important thing is to have a comprehensive eye examination at least yearly when you're over 65, and more often if recommended by your eye health practitioner. And it's important that it's comprehensive. It's with someone that you can talk to and ask questions, who does all of the tests. And if they offer you to do a photo of the eye or an OCT, I would encourage you to think about doing that because it's a really great way of picking up early disease. The second thing is you can do a little AMSLA check. Most of you will have already seen one of these little grids. You can access them via our MDFA website. And essentially, it's a check that's done with your reading glasses where you cover one eye, you look at the little dot at the center there, and you're checking to see if any of the lines are missing or wavy or broken. And this is just a demonstration of what it might look like. And then you cover the other eye and do the same process again. It's a rudimentary test, but if you do it well, if you really focus on looking at that spot and not moving your eye around, and you do it with one eye at a time, it's certainly a good test to do at home, just to pick up any changes. If you see changes, go straight to the optometrist. Now, we've talked about the two strong risk factors, so that's age and family history. The third strong risk factor for AMD is smoking. And smoking is the only modifiable risk factor, which is really important. So we know that people who smoke are 3 to 4 times more likely to develop AMD than people who don't smoke. We know that they're likely to develop AMD 10 years earlier, so at a younger age. And we also know that they're more likely to develop the late stage of AMD. So smoking, we know, is not good for the rest of our body. We certainly need to stop smoking if we want to maintain good eye health as well. So those are the strong risk factors. And then we come to the next risk factors, which are the moderate risk factors. So these risk factors include having a BMI of 30 or over, having cardiovascular disease, or if you are somebody who has hypertension, if you're taking something for blood pressure. Now, these types of risk factors you can modify because you can change your lifestyle and adopt the types of behaviors like exercising, wearing a sun hat and sun protection for the eyes, as well as eating for your eyes. There are very specific types of foods that really benefit the eye. The Macular Disease Foundation only makes recommendations that are based on the evidence, and all of our recommendations are vetted by our medical committee, which are 12 of Australia's leading researchers and ophthalmologists. So what can you do to make sure you're eating well enough for your eyes? The first thing, to have a serve of green leafy vegetables every day. So that includes spinach, silver beet, kale. They are very high in an antioxidant called lutein, and lutein is found in high concentrations in healthy eyes. We know that lutein benefits the macula. So 1 serve every day. The second thing we recommend is 2 to 3 serves of oily fish a week. And this is for the omega-3 fish oil. There is not great evidence to show that omega-3 is particularly beneficial for the eye when taken in a supplement form, but the data is there for eating it from the natural source. So that's, of course, salmon, mackerel, sardines, those types of fish. A handful of nuts a couple times a week, that's for magnesium and selenium, as well as really thinking about eating the rainbow, making sure you're eating all of the different types of fruits and vegetables. It's nature's way of showing that they're slightly different, that they have different antioxidants and vitamins. And so it's really important to eat that range, as well as adopting the Mediterranean diet. So eating healthy oils such as olive oil. Now, we were talking about the stages of AMD because we know that in the early stage, the best thing you can do is to do the types of things we've just recommended: not smoke, wear sun protection, and eat well. Now, for people who have intermediate AMD in one eye at least, there is an additional step that you can take, and that's to take a supplement called an Arids Supplement. This very specific combination of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants has been shown in the research to reduce the risk of your AMD progressing by about 20 to 25%. So that's for people who have intermediate AMD in one eye or more. And that's something that you may not know. You may not know which stage of AMD you have. So it's always good to ask your eye health practitioner that question. What stage am I at? Would I benefit from taking the Arids supplement? And as we said before, just check with your doctor before you make any changes to your diet, because kale smoothies, as delightful as they sound, they will also be very high in vitamin K. And vitamin K is something that can interfere with medications such as warfarin. So every time you make some type of adjustment, just be careful and have a chat with your GP first. Now, talking about treatment, we often people who have wet AMD, the late stage neovascular AMD, they call themselves lucky because there is a treatment. And we know that 15 years ago, people were going blind from neovascular AMD at a huge rate. These injections into the eye, as scary as that may sound, contain a substance called anti-VEGF. And this drug essentially mops up the fluid at the macula. So remember before when we had that image of the eye with the blood at the macula, it helps to stop those little blood vessels form that leak that fluid. And they have been really important in helping people to maintain their vision. They don't repair vision, they just stop your vision from deteriorating. And it's important that if you're on these types of injections that you continue as recommended by your ophthalmologist, because if you decide to go to Noosa and skip a session, your vision may well regress. And so that's important not to skip treatment. Now, there are, of course, pipeline treatments. When I do these talks publicly, people are always really keen to know, well, what's next? What's happening? What else is coming? I think one thing that people find with particularly late neovascular AMD, the wet neovascular AMD, they find the having to go to have those injections every 4 to 6 weeks really burdens them. It really limits them in terms of their lifestyle. And so there's a new treatment which has been approved for use in the US, which is called a port delivery system. And it's not approved for use in Australia yet, although it is being reviewed by the Australian Pharmaceutical Advisory Committee, the PBAC. So this little device, which looks massive there, but is only very tiny, you can see relative to this person's pupil, it's implanted into the eye permanently. And it's like a little reservoir, which then the ophthalmologist can inject the fluid into once every 6 months. So you can imagine for someone who lives in rural Australia and has trouble going to the ophthalmologist for their injections every 4 to 6 weeks, it would be life-changing to have this type of device. So as we said, not available yet, has been approved in the US, but something to watch. The other one is a new drug. So it's also an injection into the eye. Unfortunately, it's the one people are waiting for a tablet. That would be perfect. But at this stage, it's still an injection in the eye. This particular drug works along 2 different pathways. So the anti-VEGF injections that people have currently work along one particular pathway. This one basically works along 2 pathways, which means that the treatment interval, so the time between injections, has been shown to increase. So about 50% of people in the trials of this particular drug have only had to have an injection every 4 months. So you can imagine even that would be an improvement. Again, not currently available in Australia, is approved in the US, but something to watch. And then there's a treatment for geographic atrophy or dry AMD that's in the pipeline. Now, this is a little bit longer away for sure. It hasn't been approved by the FDA yet. It hasn't been submitted. Essentially, this is a drug, again, injected in the eye. Why the eye injections all the time? And we understand, we think that AMD, particularly dry AMD, is partly due to an excessive activation of the immune system. And so this drug, which is called pegcetacoplan, which is a bit of a mouthful, essentially aims to dampen down that overactive immune response. And in the large clinical trials, they just produced some latest results. They showed progression of the geographic atrophy. So the size of the holes at the macula, remember those moth-eaten holes, they weren't growing as quickly as they had expected compared to a group of people who weren't having those injections. So this is really exciting because currently there's not a lot of, well, there's no treatment for dry AMD or geographic atrophy, but it's certainly an area that people watch with interest. So this is something to keep an eye out for over the next few years, not currently available. In terms of research, there are, of course, a few more things. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. So there is the laser. So the 2RT laser, which is a nanosecond laser, is a treatment for people who have intermediate AMD, and it aims to essentially, it zaps those little dump truck cells, the RPE cells, the ones that transport the waste. And in the study done by the Centre for Eye Research Australia with Professor Robin Geimer in 2019, they showed that it slowed the progression in only one group within the study. And so they're doing further work to understand why that particular group, it showed an improvement. The second thing to talk about, of course, is the dietary ones. These often come up in the news. So it's not just oranges, and here we're talking about the antioxidant oranges, not vitamin C. It's also eggs. So oranges and eggs are all very high in antioxidants, which are thought to impact the progression of AMD. And both these studies were based on the Blue Mountain Eye study, which is a very famous study which followed more than 2,000 people over 15 years. And the data is being collected from this study and then investigated by different researchers. And in each of these groups, so in the orange group, it was found that for people who eat oranges on a regular basis, that they were less likely to develop AMD than people who didn't eat oranges. And in fact, that people who ate one orange a day had more than a 60% reduced risk of developing AMD 15 years later. So that's quite interesting data. Again, it's research data that's being researched further to see if there's potentially a clinical treatment. With eggs, it was a similar discussion. So it found that people who had 2 to 4 eggs a week compared to people who had less than 1 egg per week, the people who ate the 2 to 4 eggs were more likely they reduced their risk of developing the neovascular AMD, the late stage, compared with those who only ate 1. So again, interesting research and certainly an area to watch. The last area that I wanted to touch on was stem cell research, because this is always a bit sci-fi and people find it interesting. So this is very, very early still. There is no treatment in terms of stem cells that's approved in Australia for sure. And the foundation wants to be really clear that you can access treatments online, never do that, only ever through a clinical research group or a university. So these two studies are looking at both late AMD. One was looking at people with dry AMD, the other with wet. And essentially what they did was they took embryonic stem cells. The stem cell is a cell in the body which has the potential to become any other cell. It can become a hair cell, a tooth cell. In this case, they grew these embryonic stem cells, which come from embryos, into little RPE cells. So they grew them into those dump truck cells that move the waste, and they implanted them in people. And what they found when they implanted these little patches of the differentiated stem cells at the macula, that there was a benefit. Now, admittedly, 2 people and 5 people is a very small group. So this is very early data, but this has become the sort of the matrix on which they build. So they're now looking further into stem cell therapy as a solution for AMD. So lastly, just talking about the importance of having regular eye tests. That's kind of the big take-home point today. Most people will be asymptomatic for early and intermediate AMD, and we really want to make sure people get tested, even if you feel your vision's fine. Monitor at home, make sure you eat a macula-friendly diet, and don't smoke, and try and exercise regularly. And lastly, the Macula Disease Foundation is a non-for-profit supporting people with macular disease, and we have 4 pillars of work. And today I really just wanted to briefly touch on the supports and services that we offer people living with macular disease, not just AMD, but also genetic macular disorders, as well as diabetic macular edema. So we have a national helpline, which is a 1-800 number that you can call at any time for information and support. We have resources that you can access through our website, which are available in different languages. We also have a series of webinars that you can watch live or online via the website, as well as peer support groups. This has been our biggest initiative in the last 3 years, particularly through COVID. People with vision loss really craving that need to speak with people who are also having that same lived experience. Sharing that lived experience is super powerful. And we have a series of different types of peer support groups where people come together, whether it's online or face-to-face or via the phone, where they just get to talk about their situation and understand other people's situation and learn from each other. Of course, one of the most important things that we do is link people with low vision services, and Quantum is definitely one of my favorite. I've done a lot of work with Quantum and the team are always super helpful. And lastly, we take people through those government services which they need more and more as they come later in life. And so our team spend a lot of time talking people through the intricacies of my aged care and other delights. And so lastly, just finishing on this slide here, referring before Peter comes in, this is our national toll-free helpline number and our website, and you can access all of the information that I've talked about today right there. So I'm going to hand back to you now, Rebecca.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sabine. That was wonderful. And I think we have had a couple of questions in the chat, but if you're all right to stay around, we'll do those at the end. So yeah, that was a wonderful overview, and I will put I'll put the your 1-800 number in the link that goes out to everybody that's registered, so they've got
Thanks, Rebecca.
that. So no worries. So I'll just share my screen very briefly. So now we're going to have a presentation by Peter Cracknell in our Queensland office, and Peter's got about 20 years experience working in assistive technology, and he'll take us through some of the aids and equipment that can help. So over to you, Peter. Oh, and I'll just...
Great. I'm talking to you from our site support centre at Wickham Terrace in Spring Hill, Brisbane. Here we can see people by appointment in normal business hours, but we also visit people in their homes and workplaces, and we can trial equipment with them in those places as well. So today I'd just like to talk a little bit about the aids and equipment that we can help with. And I like to say that what you do when glasses are no longer enough, when you've been to the optometrist and they've corrected your vision as much as they can, when you've been to the ophthalmologist and they're treating you as best as they can, but you still can't read or manage your everyday affairs, sign checks and so on. So what do you do? Who do you go to? Well, this is where we come in. So we do equipment beyond spectacles. We do a little bit of some modified spectacles, as you'll see in a moment, but it's really the next level up of equipment that can help people to do their everyday tasks, their everyday reading, a little bit of handiwork and so on. I think we're trying to, when we talk to ophthalmologists and optometrists, we try to encourage them to refer to us early in the vision journey, rather than referring to us when somebody's vision is very, very poor. We encourage the eye specialist to refer to us as soon as people are struggling to read beyond their normal correction in their spectacles. So I think it's very important that that message gets across. We talk to eye specialists all the time about this and encourage them to refer from very early days. So I'm going to start with taking that point where somebody's just been either newly diagnosed or perhaps their optometrist has said, I'm sorry, I can't make you any stronger spectacles. I'm going to start with the next step, which will be about lighting and magnification. Sabine will have mentioned, of course, that lighting is very important for people with low vision to increase the light levels, especially for task work, but also to keep the glare down as well. Many people with macular disease often complain that they're sensitive to glare. Not just outside either, it can be indoors as well. So it's very important that any lamps or lighting takes that into account. So for example, if you have a light like this one, so the ability to rotate it so that it acts as a shade as well, and the ability to increase the brightness levels or decrease the brightness levels. And to bring the lighting close to the material you're trying to work with. This is what we mean by task lighting. I'm not talking about overhead lighting, I'm talking about lighting that's near your armchair, on your desk, so that we can concentrate the light to get the best benefit. And sometimes that's all people need, is good task lighting. They're able to read much more efficiently with that. And we have a range of different lamps. Some of them, again, with shades like this. These are movable from room to room, or even rechargeable that can be folded up and so on, and just placed on the dinner table and operated with a simple button here like this. So lighting is the first thing we look at. As I was mentioning before, it's important to have flexibility in your lamp so you can get the light close to the task in hand. So if you're sitting in an armchair and you're working with some knitting or maybe looking at the TV guide, to be able to adjust it so that it's concentrated just in your lamp. Now you may have noticed that this particular lamp, the Magnificent lamp, actually has a lens as well. This is not a very high power lens, it's only a 2 times power lens, but it gives just enough magnification for people just at the beginning of some low vision. And it's extremely good where you need a good field of view. As you can see, it's about 10 centimeters wide. And so you can work hands-free with an object, maybe with some sewing, something like that, or some other task or activity. And you can just look through the lens and be hands-free. So this is a very popular solution, not just for hobby work, but also for a bit of reading as well. You can imagine you could have the TV guide behind this, and you could just have this next to your armchair, and you could be reading those sorts of materials. So this is the first thing we look at is, of course, improving lighting. The next thing we would look at is magnification. And I've already mentioned the Magnificent lamp here. We all know about magnifying glasses, of course, and many of our customers have a drawer full of magnifying glasses that don't quite work for them. So the magnifying glasses that we actually provide were actually designed for people with low vision and manufactured in Europe. So we have very high quality magnifying glasses of different powers and strengths, and they are all illuminated. So we have task lighting in each one. So this means that when I'm inspecting something, it's illuminating the object, and I'm just looking through the lens like this. Now you might think, well, that's fantastic, and it is for many, many people. Very portable. It does no technology involved, just batteries to replace, or indeed it is possible to use a recharging station for one of our models where we can rest it on the recharging pad, and you don't even need to change the batteries then. Simple to use, pocket size, take it from room to room or put in your handbag. The only issue with magnifying glasses is that for people, as their vision deteriorates, they need stronger lenses, and the field of view of the lens decreases. So this one here on the left is actually weaker than the one on the right. This small lens magnifier it's around about a 10 to 12 times magnification. And you think, well, that would be sufficient, but there is another problem. The field of view is very small. So when I'm using this magnifier, I need to have it in my eye and my nose pretty much on the paperwork to form any image at all. And that's very, very uncomfortable. We're not able to read for very long with this kind of a magnifying glass. We would be instead looking at an electronic magnifying glass, and I'll show you those in a moment. Before I do, though, I just want to touch on just some spectacle solutions that will help some people. So I did say that we take over where optometrists leave off, but we do actually have a range of specialised prismatic spectacles here. Now that you cannot wear your own spectacles underneath these, they're purely for reading tasks or for small fine work. And here you do have to bring the object reasonably close to your face, but it can be very useful just for a very convenient small amount of magnification. Just looking here now at some of the other spectacle solutions. These are not a thing of beauty, I know, but they do give a 2 times magnification of things around about arm's length. So you can see we have an extra lens at the front and a lens closer to the eye, and these lenses can be adjusted. You cannot wear your spectacles underneath these. And the idea is that, for example, let's say you were trying to read some piano music score. You could wear these and get a magnified view of the piano music score, and then your hands are free to play the piano, of course. Similarly, you might be working with an object, maybe fixing something, and you get a 2 times magnification. Similarly, we have a pair called the Max TV, which were designed to give a little bit of magnification of the television set. So you can sit in your normal armchair, put the Max TV glasses on, and you'll get a 2 times magnification on the screen. And that might be that all people need just to be able to read a subtitle or the weather, or to see somebody's newscaster's face a little bit more clearly. I did mention that there comes a point when magnifying glasses are not really a comfortable solution for reading. And this is where we have a whole range of electronic magnifiers that we're going to just show you. I'm going to start with some of the smaller ones. So we have a range of electronic magnifiers which in some ways resemble a normal conventional magnifier. Some of them have got handles and a large screen. It's a 5-inch screen, it's called a Clover 5. And when I place it onto paperwork, you'll see that it magnifies very strongly. It's looking through the camera at the back, and it's resting, in this case, on the paperwork. We can lift it off the paperwork as well, like a conventional magnifier, or we can place it directly on the screen. We have another version, slightly larger, which rests on an incline onto the paperwork to make it a more comfortable angle for reading. And we have a smaller version still, again with a little stand at the back to incline it forward. So why are these superior to the optical magnifying glass? The first reason is that the field of view is bigger. The magnification is much, much bigger. The magnified text is straight from edge to edge. There's no distortion, and there's no bend at the end of the glass. This is all straight from edge to edge, and you can fit more magnified words on the screen. So here now we can actually read just by sliding it across left and right at a large magnification. We could not achieve these magnifications with an optical magnifying glass. It's just not possible. But the other thing is, of course, I am at a comfortable position. I can read upright. I don't have to have this in my eye. So this makes for greater comfort when reading. So the choice there when we're talking to people is about, well, how much screen size do you need? Do you need to have a big screen, or could you manage with a small screen? This could be very convenient to put in a pocket and take to the restaurant, but perhaps the screen is too small. This is where we come in, this is where our expertise come in, and the ability to demonstrate a range of equipment. So our job is very much to demonstrate a range of different sizes, different brands, and arrive at the thing that suits the person for the tasks they wish to do. So the tasks that the portable magnifiers are really good at is for when you just want to pull something out of the pantry and just check the packaging. Perhaps you're in a supermarket and you want to check labels and so on, because these are highly portable. I was just saying that the benefit of the portable electronic magnifiers is that they can be taken and used in shops and supermarkets and restaurants and so on, and anywhere in the house. Many people say that it's not just that kind of activity they wish to do. They want to do some writing tasks as well. And so we have a range of electronic magnifiers that are raised up slightly to allow you to get the pen in underneath and to get larger objects like books and magazines underneath. So I'm just going to show you one with a larger format here, screen here. This one here's the Clover book, and it actually does fold up into itself, and you can transport it from room to room very easily. So for larger reading materials like a book, you can place it under the screen here, and then you can either choose to move the book by hand or to swipe the screen, because it is a touch screen. You can change the contrast if you prefer a low glare, and of course the magnification. And we have a range of these in different shapes and sizes. But the general idea is that you can get larger reading materials and you can do some handwriting with perhaps a crossword or something here as well. Where people need bigger screens still, especially if they're reading books, we would actually tend to recommend instead the larger models. And on the table here, we have some of our larger desktop models. Ranging from what we call a Magni-Link zip here, which actually will fold up and is easily transported, to a Digimax, which has got its camera on the outside so that you can see your real hand as well as your magnified work on the large screen there. This is very popular for writing tasks like Sudoku and so on. The camera can also be aimed towards yourself, and you can actually do some makeup and so on, or personal grooming by twisting the camera towards yourself. The largest screen we do is a 24-inch screen. This one is clear view. The screen can be lifted and adjusted, and it has a sliding tray underneath, which allows us to move heavier objects and larger objects like magazines and newspapers. If I make the magnification bigger, you'll see that for the column of a newspaper can be fitted in from edge to edge, allowing for much more comfortable reading. If you need even bigger magnifications, the sliding tray facilitates smooth motion from left to right and back and forth. So this is a very large magnification of around about 30 times. Somebody using it at this magnification would have very advanced macular degeneration. And we do have customers, very elderly customers with very advanced macular degeneration who can successfully read some materials at this level of magnification. So this should give some encouragement to people, even if they have very advanced macular disease, that they can still manage their own reading to some extent. What we do find, though, is some people do get fatigue if they're reading at these kind of magnifications. And so we have the option to have this text read out loud with this machine. What we do is we touch the corner of the screen.
Position the text inside a window and tap the screen.
I will use this. You place the magazine or the book in the viewing area there. You tap the screen, Now, the computer that's inside this screen is actually now processing for any print that it can understand. It's looking at all the zones that it can see, and it's identifying them in the order from top to bottom that it could read. So I'm just going to magnify this with this control on the screen here, and I'm going to drag with my finger the magnified image. You see how it's very much like an iPad that you can drag the image around, and then I can touch just the print that I wish to start with. I'm just going to drag that into view.
Fresh from his official campaign launch on Sunday in Brisbane and campaigning in the Labor Health seat where the Prime Minister said there would be no delay if the coalition was returned to government because they would know what to do on Sunday and Monday. Mr. Morrison extended the immediate post-election agenda to the critical quadrilateral meantime.
It's very simple to operate the controls for speed and volume and magnification. And it means that people who are fatiguing when they're visually reading can just sit back and listen to the document. And many people would prefer to select this piece of equipment, the Clearview Speech, even if they didn't need it at this stage of their vision loss, knowing that the speech element would always be available should their vision loss progress. And indeed, some people don't benefit from magnification at all. And for those people, we can actually rely entirely on the speech. So I'm going to show you a couple of devices that are speech only. This device here is called the Clear Reader. It's about the size of a kitchen radio. And the idea is that you place your reading material just in front of it. You press a button. All the buttons are simple and tactile, so you don't have to have any vision at all to operate this machine. It then processes the page and reads it out from top to bottom.
Chlorine coloured. In a small cubicle LA facilities for making tea, there was no toilet, the normal bar in shops, for everyone was expected to use the toilets in the bar and water baths.
And I can pause it, I can rewind, and I can spell any word that I'm on. So it's a very powerful tool for people with no vision to be able to access their printed materials. Now, for this, of course, would be sat in one location. You'd have it by your armchair or in the bedroom or in the kitchen. But we often have people that want a more portable reading machine of the same sort. We have from Orcam in Israel a device called the Orcam Read. And this is a much more portable device. It's often worn around the neck with a lanyard. It has a speaker at the back and a camera at the front. So the idea is, I'm just going to see if I can connect it to a louder speaker. I don't think that's going to happen, Mike. So, come in. So what we're going to do is I'm going to demonstrate this, and I'll bring it up to your microphone there so that you can hear.
The ladies of Miss Along, I see, said Missy, forgetting all about perusing the novels. She sat down again. Una, do you have an address for whoever is buying Byron bottle shares?
So that was just so fast. I was able to aim it at the document, press the button at the front, and within a couple of seconds, it was reading the document. So you can imagine how useful that would be out and about in a restaurant, in a doctor's waiting room, reading a magazine, and not just paperwork. It can also read electronic text as well. So it could be on a display outside a hairdresser, or it could be on an iPad or on a television. You simply have to aim it at the text, press the button, and within a couple of seconds, it's reading what it can see within its field of view. This field of view is narrow when you're close to the print, or very wide if you're at a few feet from it. So, for example, if you had a shop sign, you could just stand a few feet from the shop sign, aim it at the shop sign, press the button, and then it would read the shop sign for you. This is the Orcam read. We have an even smaller version called the Orcam II, and this actually clips to the side of spectacles like this. We have a small magnetic mount that we fit to people's spectacles, and that means that we're now hands-free. We can, instead of actually pressing a button, we can just point to the print that we want to read out loud. The Orcam II sees the finger and knows that you want to read what you're pointing to, and then it reads in your ear or via Bluetooth to earbuds or even hearing aids. This particular version of the Orcam has got several other features that can be beneficial for people with macular degeneration. One of them is that it can be trained to recognize people's faces, and as they approach, their name will be spoken in your ear. And many people complain that they feel socially isolated because they can never respond to people across the street or approaching them, because through their macular disease, they can't recognize them. But these kinds of aids can help people interact more naturally with their neighbors and friends and family.
Thanks, Ben.
So how are we going for time, Rebecca?
We're just after 12, so yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
if I might just finish on the subject of computers.
While you're doing that, Peter, I might just mention with the text-to-speech devices, a lot of them now will do other languages. It doesn't translate, but if you're reading in, say, Italian, or we've got ones that read Mandarin and things like that, there are a range of other languages for different devices. So if that's something that you need, then we can look at that.
Thank you.
And it's printed text that they read, rather than handwriting, unfortunately.
My computer has gone to sleep, so I'll just have to restart that. While it's doing that, I would like to also just mention about some of the headsets and wearables that some people will find an option. So we do have a range of virtual reality headsets that have been modified for people with low vision. The idea is that it's to watch things at a distance, whether it's the television or maybe a sporting event or a cinema or something like that. There's a camera and a pair of screens inside. The idea is that you can place them in front of on your face, and with a controller you can actually zoom in and out on the distant object, which could be a person, it could be, as I say, a sporting event, and it gives magnifications up to around about 10 times. The thing about these is, for some people, they may feel uncomfortable, physically uncomfortable, wearing a thing on their face, but you can imagine that it could be useful at home, for example, if you're struggling to watch television, to have a single device that you place like this. In the future, we hope to be able to stream television directly into these devices, so you don't even need to look at the television. You could be lying in bed wearing this and watching television through the glasses. There are different versions, of course. So this one here, the A-Sight, is actually not enclosed. You're not completely enclosed, and so your eyes can see the peripheral vision around you as well. Whereas for the enclosed ones, they completely block out any peripheral vision.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe while you're logging in, Peter, I'll just, so you're going to show a little bit of, talk about the software that people can access their computers. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, so whilst the computer is starting up, people often find that with their macular disease, they can no longer use email anymore or read the internet. So there's a couple of things that we can help with there. The first thing is we can use software to magnify what's on the screen. And the second thing is we can provide modified keyboards that are larger print. So I'm just going to get one of those and show you what I mean.
Okay.
So, for example, we can provide keyboards with very high contrast lettering and larger lettering, so that it's just easier to identify for people with low vision. This is a Bluetooth keyboard. We also have USB keyboards as well. So the thing that people complain about with the computer is that they just can't see the small writing on the icons or in their emails and so on. So we have a program called Zoomtext, which does exactly what it says. It zooms the text. So you operate your computer in the normal way, perhaps with a modified large print keyboard, but your screen is now magnified. And we can increase the magnification to a very large extent. So if I'm looking at an icon now, you can see that they are much magnified, and I can make them even more magnified, like so. So if I'm typing in a program like Microsoft Word, all that can be magnified, and in addition, it can be spoken out loud as well. Mm-hmm. So we can actually have our typing spoken out by the computer. I'm just going to turn the voice on, just bear with me a moment.
Volume 61 units.
Mm-hmm.
Task switching. Document 1 word.
So you can see the hourglass is much magnified, and all of the ribbons at the top, the file, the various controls at the top for cutting and pasting, they're all magnified too. Your emails can be read out loud, your typing can be read out loud as well. So with these sorts of modifications with software, people can still retain their access to emails, all the dad jokes they get through their emails, and of course all the news that we're so dependent on via all the various news services.
Zoom level 2.
So I hope that just gives an overview of the sorts of ways we can help people with vision problems, not just for heavy duty reading, also for computer access, for everyday tasks by looking at medication and food packaging and so on, and also not just in the home, but outside the home too. So Rebecca, I'm going to hand back to you to wrap up. I know I've gone over, I apologise, but there's just so much available today.
Oh no, that's great. Thank you, Peter. So I'll just share. So if anyone's got any questions, we have got some in the chat. So I'll just unpin your video so we can all talk. So there were, I know Sabine did answer one about the Arids 2. So somebody had asked if it was recommended to decrease the risk of macular disease. So
yeah, so we have to be very careful about how we interpret the data. So what that study showed, the Arids 2 study, it showed that the people who benefit from Arids 2 are only people who have intermediate AMD in one eye or late AMD in the other eye, or intermediate AMD in both eyes, and that it only benefits them in slowing the progression of their disease. And it did not have any evidence to show that it would benefit anybody else taking it to prevent them getting AMD or anything like that. So very specifically, only those people in slowing the progression of the disease.
Oh, thank you, Sabine. And one for us, Peter, somebody had asked about, is there funding available for assistive technology products? And there is. Did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, yes, there is. Of course, probably the majority of the people we see are privately funded people, but there are some avenues for funding depending on a number of factors. So for people under 65, there's a couple of areas for government funding. One is the National Disability Insurance Scheme, the NDIS, and the other is the Job Access Scheme for people who are of working age. So those schemes will fully fund any equipment that meets certain criteria. There is obviously an assessment involved. You usually have an occupational therapist or an assistive technology specialist that will assess you for those things. So generally, that funding will generally apply to people of working age or under 65. For people over 65, the My Aged Care system, they release packages through the home care package to people over 65 who need extra support to remain independent at home. And of course, most of our customers, that's exactly what they want to do. They want to remain independent at home. The obstacle that they are addressing with us, of course, is their reading independence, being able to read independently at home. And home care packages can use funding from their home care packages for any of this equipment. Oftentimes, that is money that hasn't been spent on other services, but we can certainly assist the home care package provider and the client themselves to trial equipment and to assist them getting it delivered through a home care package. Mm-hmm. And finally, there is some funding for people who are with the Department of Veterans Affairs, and most of our equipment is funded for people who are veterans or the wives of veterans.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Somebody's asked, is there any mobile phone app for enlarging text messages for AMD clients? So.
Yes, indeed. There are many hundreds of apps for enlarging. And in fact, that's one of the first things that if I see somebody has an iPhone or something like that, and they maybe at the beginning of their low vision, that's the first go-to thing would be, have you tried just using the camera on your iPhone to magnify what you're seeing? And so that's often the very first port of call. You don't actually need an app for that. You could just use the camera in your iPhone and just pinch zoom the image. Very, very useful for people that are already using iPhones or Android phones.
I think that they were actually talking for enlarging their text messages. So that is a built-in. There is accessibility if you've got an iPhone.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yes.
Yeah, there's a zoom function in the settings, so that is possible. I think on Android there probably is as well to set up larger text.
Yes, both platforms. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So for your text messages.
I would, if anybody needs some training and setting those things up, some of the iPhone stores are actually quite good at those accessibility features. You could take your iPhone to one of the iPhone stores, the Apple stores. Also, the assistive technology consultants at Vision Australia, they are able to set up people's phones to maximise the size of the text and the contrast and so on. We actually, it does bring me to a point that we actually do now sell a mobile phone which was designed for people with low vision. It's called the Blind Shell. Sorry, I didn't have time to go over that today, but it's a tactile smartphone with speech output and large display. So if anybody's interested in looking for a mobile phone that has quite a lot of features, but is not as difficult as an iPhone to operate, we can certainly demonstrate that to people.
Yeah, and our last webinar, I think, was on that. So the recording's available for that. I can point people in the right direction as well. So for that one. So I don't know if anyone else. Oh, we did have some questions. Some of the questions that came in on the registration form were a bit more general. So someone that's concerned that in time with their macular degeneration, they may find it difficult to keep up with documentation. So hopefully this has shown that there is things out to help with that. And occupational therapists making recommendations for clients with macular disease to assist them with maintaining in their independence. I suggest, certainly making things bigger, brighter, bolder, or contacting us, or looking at assistive technology if that's appropriate, lighting, magnifiers and things. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
I might just
get in touch with us.
I'll just say that a lot of occupational therapists are very well versed in a lot of the physical aspects of disability, but may not be very aware of all of the subtleties of losing your vision. So it's probably best to get someone that has a bit of experience, an OT that perhaps from Guide Dogs of Vision Australia or one of the larger independent agencies that has some experience of vision loss and understands what modifications are useful.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, if there's not any more questions, I'll just put up our contact information. So first of all, thank you so much, Sabine, for being part of today and that wonderful presentation and overview of macular disease and how the foundation can help. I know you've got some wonderful resources there. And also Peter for that great presentation on an overview of what we can provide. So I'll just put, if people do want to have further information about the sorts of equipment that we can provide, please contact our website's got a lot of information, quantumrlv.com.au. We've also got a 1300 number, 1300 883 853, and our wonderful customer service team will put you in touch with your local consultant. And we've got the general info at quantumrlv.com.au. So yeah, I guess the take-home message today is, you know, get your macula checked and monitor for changes, as Sabine said, and get help if you need it. And there is help out there if you have got macular disease, if your vision's changing, to keep you independent and managing your everyday life. So thank you, everybody, and I'll stop it there. Cheers.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Okay, thank you.